I'm going to just let everybody enter here while we get started. We have about 54 people who are joining us right now.
I think we should just looking at who's here. I think we should just open all the mics and everybody just talk.
Does anybody remember Romper Room? Anyone?
Yes.
Margaret's saying yes. I feel like I need a little mirror to describe everybody I see. So welcome to our ISET expert panel tonight. We have the wonderful Joy Zabala and Janice Carson here to speak to you. And Dr. Aleksandra Hollingshead and I are going to help facilitate the conversation. And as you can see, there are many of us. So if you could go over the ground rules, Alex, that would be helpful.
Sure. Thank you. So if you could all mute your microphones, please, and keep them muted. And if you have any questions, if you could post them in the chat. And we have a set of questions to ask to our speakers, but then we'll pull the questions from the chat and either ask you to unmute yourself and speak and ask your questions in person, or I will read them out loud. Okay. So welcome to tonight's webinar, provided to you by the Innovations in Special Education Technology Division of the Council of Exceptional Children. I'm Dr. Alex Hollingshead from the University of Idaho, and I'm honored to be serving as the Vice President on the ISET board. And we are very excited to have two fabulous speakers with us tonight, Dr. Joy Zabala from the Center on Applied Special Technology and Dr. Janice Carson from the University of Idaho. So now, without further ado, Joy and Janice, I would like you each to please introduce yourself and then describe your jobs. And in your description, if you could make a little bit of comparison of what did your job used to look like before March 2020, and what does it look like now? Joy, would you like to go first? And you're muted.
Sorry, beginner's error. So my job is probably not a lot different than it was before March. There's just more of it. And that's probably the case for so many people. CAST actually is not the Center for Applied Special Technology now. It's just CAST. We're like the ARC. We just are CAST. And I am the principal investigator for the Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems, which is looking at something that I think everybody on this call has been working on for probably their whole career, and that's bringing general ed technology and special ed technology and information technology into a balanced ecosystem of technology in districts. And I was recently asked, well, why do you think that's going to work? Well, we've been trying to do this all this time. And I said, well, what am I supposed to say? I don't think it'll work. No, of course. So it really, actually, the pandemic has been, I don't know that we could ever call it a blessing, but it's certainly upped the importance of general technology and special technology working together, or uses of technology for all populations, where everyone is included in that ecosystem, because technology has become an incredibly important part of what we do on a daily basis. So the more of it part, I have been working toward backing out a bit, and was doing fairly well about that until January and February and March. And the biggest change for my personal life, because I was a Zoomer before everybody was a Zoomer, because I've worked remotely for 14 years, but I was also on airplanes a lot. Since February the 7th of last year, I have not been more than 20 miles away from where I'm sitting right now, which is vastly different. Thank goodness my husband and my dog still let me stay.
Thank you so much.
To you.
Hi, I'm Janice Carson, and as Alex said, I'm at the University of Idaho, and Alex and I are colleagues. I am the director of Idaho's Assistive Technology project, the Idaho AT project. And for those of you who don't know, it's a federally funded project in HHS. There's one in every state and territory. We do really a variety of activities for the state. But I'll really focus tonight on really our lending libraries of assistive technology that we have across our state, that we want consumers to try the technology before they buy it. And as I said, I'm with the University of Idaho and affiliate faculty, and I teach an AT Universal Design for Learning course. And prior to my current position, I was at the State Department of Ed. And I monitored special ed for Idaho, worked on secondary transition, AT, just a variety of things. And I was also a general education teacher and a special education teacher. My job before COVID, well, number one, I'm not traveling as much right now. So it's really quite unique to be home on a regular basis. Boy, the things you can get done. As my day job, I call it, as the director of the AT project, we have those lending libraries. And so prior to COVID, we had people coming in and out of our lending libraries. There are 4 across the state, from the top of Idaho down and around. It's L-shaped. We have 4 lending libraries down and around, and I have AT specialists and AT professionals in all of those locations. And Idahoans were able to come in and borrow equipment. We're not doing that anymore. I know that's surprising to all of you. We now do distance demonstration and technical assistance, and we're doing curbside. And I talk about it like this. Remember when you were a kid and you would run up and ring someone's doorbell? Well, that's what we do right now. We drop it and we run. The person comes and grabs it, they pick it up, and vice versa when they're returning it. So gloved up, lots of PPE going on. And we do and so that has worked really, really well. And we're lucky to be able to do that. We've also done, and I'll talk about that as well, we've also done a lot of drop shipping to Idahoans of assistive technology. We do have a contract with the State Department of Ed, and we've had it since 2001. To provide AT services for pre-K-12. And I think that's about it. Our protocol for cleaning hasn't changed because we've always been making sure that things are clean. So that really hasn't changed for too much.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Joy, if you could briefly describe what SETT framework is for those in the audience that maybe need a little refresher. And then if you could discuss how the SETT framework can be applied to remote teaching and learning.
Sure. Well, the SETT framework sort of came about for 2 reasons. One was that people who were very involved in making change often didn't feel like they knew enough to participate in a discussion about assistive technology. They would say, I don't know the tools. I really don't have anything to offer. Just tell me what to do, which we all know just telling someone what to do has very limited return on investment. And that was part of the reason. So the notion is that you have to know the student, the environments, and the tasks before you can think of what the tools need to be that will help that student do those tasks in the environments in which they find themselves or where they're supposed to be used. And that's like, in some ways, that's really all you need to know. Everything after that is just how it blossoms into something much, much bigger. So it's who's going to do what, where, and then comes the how, and the notion that you really, to try to select technology without thinking about those things makes it a lot more difficult and a lot more magical when it actually works. And the other piece that's important is building a shared understanding of the student, the environments, and the tasks before the tools. Because sometimes what we do with the best intentions in the world is we try to solve problems that may not even be problems. It may not be an entire task that's hard for someone, but just a part of a task. It may be that I think we're going this direction and you think we're going that direction, and the student themselves thinks they're going another direction. And so that opportunity to move forward together is really essential, I think. And the notion with the framework is you may not know what the tools are, but you may be the student. You are the most important voice in this conversation. You may be one of the people who sets up the environments, the parents, the teachers, the community people. You may know exactly what tasks are going to be expected and what tasks are likely to be difficult. And what I do, what I'm saying, when I'm talking about it, is I say, okay, after we've had our discussion, okay, this is what we know about James, right, James? Does this work? Is there anything we need to add? Here's what we know about the environments. Here's what we know about the tasks. We all come with our own approach. We come with an I and we become a we. And my switch from that part to thinking about the tools is, so if there were something out there that would help James do what he needs to do, where he needs to do it, what would that be like? That may sound not very different than what features would you need, but it really is very different. Because when you say what would it be like, people will start describing really well what's needed in this system of tools that we're looking at. And the tools in the SETT framework are not just devices. 25 years ago, the conversation was all about device. But now it's very much about, basically, it's the response. The tools are the response that we provide so that the student can do what they need to do where they need to do it. That's like a quickie overview. And I think for everyone here, I could just probably say, just remember, don't get into tools until you know who's going to use them, where they're going to use them, and what they're going to use them for. And you would go, oh yeah, of course. And a lot of people do that, and a lot of people don't.
So how can the SETT framework be applied in remote teaching and learning, or has that changed, or not at all?
Well, to me, that hasn't changed, but it has certainly, I think, in many people's minds. You've got to that's the environment. If we ever thought the environments were not critical, this pandemic has given us really a spotlight on the environments, because we have to think not only are the environments, we have, so many environments to talk about now. Each student is in a different environment in many, many places. And then we are in different environments as well. There's a really big difference in thinking only about the students' environments, because we have to think of our own as well. And I think that's one of the things that we miss sometimes is, what about us? What are the strengths of our environments and the challenges of the environment in which we do our work at this point, which is significantly different than it was. So I would say that probably one of the things that to me would be important, simply as a thought, is it's sort of individualization at its best, or its worst, depending on how you look at it, because the description of the strengths and the challenges within both your own environments and the environments in which the student is living, learning, and growing at the moment are very different, and honestly much less, I hate to use the word controllable, but that's sort of what I mean. There's not much fixed from one environment to another, which certainly makes it a challenge. But the SETT framework doesn't care what environment you're in. It's just, you got to understand a bit about what that environment is. So as far as it shifting as we go to remote, it's mostly shifting in terms of degree and how we think carefully about what those environments are like for students.
Janice, do you have anything to add to this? And you sort of work with the tools part of this framework the most. How has that changed in your?
We do work with the tools. I love how Joy talked about that conversation in the kind of that IEP team meeting and the team working together, and everyone's voice is so critical. and walking through and considering all of the components. I completely agree with Joy that the process hasn't changed. We certainly don't want to leave our process. And so that's something that we have found, whether it's face-to-face or a face-to-face support that we're doing across the state, because remember, we do AT for pre-K 12 in Idaho, whether we're going into schools. Historically, that's what we've done and provided technical assistance and taken equipment in and provided support. So how that would work is we have an online secure form that we gather background information. We want to know some information about the student, their environments. I know this is going to sound so darn familiar. Environments are critical. We want to know the tasks and the tools that they have been using in the past as well. And we also do a lot of conversations, phone conversations with the team. The IEP team invites us in and asks us for some support. And so what we look at is we're trying to take a plethora of equipment and working with the student individually when we're face-to-face and go from a big group of items, and then really kind of narrow it down and support the team on what they will be looking at. We are not a member of the IEP team. We're support for the IEP team. They make the final decisions. We leave the equipment with them, and then they do the trials and make the decisions on what will work, what makes sense for them to purchase. We do have, in some instances, some supports where we can leave equipment. It's depending on the LEA and stuff where we're able to provide that as well. It just depends on the particular need. There's the word, the particular need. I'm thinking about just LEAs that are smaller, rural, and less funding. We try and do extra supports. So that we've always done. We've always had that intake form. We're still doing that because you need to realize in Idaho, we're face-to-face, we are hybrid, we are online, we're kind of all over the place. And so the process stays the same. We do that intake form, and we have a meeting tomorrow that I'm going to be on working with an LEA down in the deep south of Idaho, down in southeast Idaho. And so we want that background information. We need to know what's going on. So we're working with the team. The Zoom meeting then becomes a deeper dive of what the needs are and helping us figure out what it is that we're going to ship to the school. It's either going to go to the school or it's going to go to the family's home. If they're at hybrid or at a distance in school, it's going to go to the home. And so we absolutely get that information and we figure out what it is that we need for trials and we get that shipped out to them. It takes time. Sometimes the process is longer now and it takes time, but you have to consider this a long-term ongoing relationship, because when we're done, we also send it, when it's all said and done and we've given some information, we also provide a report to the team that they can review. We consider this ongoing because we'll work with students year after year and IEP teams year after year. So we're their technical assistance and support. And then if they have questions with their AT plan and need a little more tweaking and information, they contact us and we'll provide them additional support. So that really in itself hasn't changed. It's just sometimes it shifts how we're delivering some services to the teams.
Now, one thing I wanted, because I think you did a very nice job of sort of talking about how the SETT framework works for you when you get to the tools part. And if somebody comes and they said, here are the barriers that we're trying to lower, what a difference that is just saying, I think I need some assistive technology, which leaves you nowhere. And I think one of the things that to me over the years has been important to think about is that the SETT framework is not a thing. It isn't a protocol that you do these 5 things and then this happens, and that's hard because people just want you to tell them what to do. And I know that every single one of you faces that every day. That's certainly not unique to the situations that we're in. But it's a way of thinking and hopefully a way of acting And having an idea of, to sound like Stephen Covey, to sort of know where you're going. And it's that building shared knowledge about where you're going that enables you to really bring in the discussion of the tools, and knowing that it may be a device, it may be more than one device, it may be a strategy, it may be training for the teacher or the parent. All of those things are part of the tools. And so devices are just one piece of that tool set, a really important piece, but not the only piece. All of us have had that experience where, of course, none of us have done it, but where we've heard of people saying, they just gave me the device, here it is, good luck. Well, that's not going to work. And what you're going to hear when it doesn't work is this device did not work, when that may not be the issue at all. And I think that's the other place a lot of people, and I think maybe in a way, a lot of what we're talking about tonight tends to make the SETT framework look like it fits in assessment. And really it fits across all services, because you're thinking about this when you're implementing, you're thinking about when you're evaluating the effectiveness of what you're doing. And in that evaluation of effectiveness, you're looking at, so was it that this set of tools, devices, and services that we're providing are not a good match for this kid, which I think is where we started out 25 years ago, just matching those two things together. Or is there a mismatch somewhere with the environment? Were we really thinking about, or were we really aware of what that environment was like, and what the challenges and what the barriers were in that environment, that now we have to make some adjustments? And it could be that we have to make some adjustments in the tool, the device, but it could be that those other parts of the tool system.
So thank you both. So in both contexts, going through the process of considering all the pieces of SETT framework, as well as the assistive technology evaluation or assessment, would you be able to discuss some best practices and how those, both in the context of face-to-face interactions with school districts and teachers and individuals with disabilities, as well as now in the remote settings? So are there best practices that kind of work for both environments or both styles of interaction? And then I guess this second part of this question is maybe more for Janice. I'm assuming, Joe, you don't directly work with school districts so as much anymore, but
but not about assistive technology particularly.
Right. So have you seen things related to these processes that are working well right now, or certain areas that consistently become a struggle for providers, for the evaluators, for people considering the framework and so on? Sorry, it's kind of a convoluted multi-component question.
It's okay. It's a multi-component world at this point. Janice, you want to start that?
Sure. We know each other really well, Alex. I'm good. I gotcha. Got your question. I'm just as you're talking about that things rolling in my head. Certainly, just some tricks of the trade. I think what we have learned just at that distance, component is let me talk specifically to some AAC work that we've been doing. We have some SLPs who are AAC experts that are contractors, and they're working with our LEAs and those that are at a distance and providing services and stuff. And something that's important to note is that always we want the family very much involved, but boy, is the family very much involved, and they really get to know those speech generating devices, certainly in this format. And we have actually found that when this is done at a distance, our family members really are much more involved with that process, and it's become a very positive situation. It's important for your professional when you're working and trying to problem solve or provide services, that they're able to see the student. So right now, you have no idea what I'm doing with my hands, except when I go like this and I'm talking with them, and you have no idea what's sitting on my desk. And so you need an outside remote camera to be able to see what's going on. We have found that in a remote setting What that can be a remote camera, it can be an iPad that is connected to like a Zoom meeting or a smartphone, something so that the student can be seen as well as devices can be seen when you are providing some service. So we have found that to be a really important factor for some best practice. Otherwise, you have no idea what's going on. That environment, the teams really need to think about exactly what they want that child to do if they're face to face, sitting right next to them, and how can we replicate that at a distance, and think about the ways that with that different environment, what that will look like and what the supports need to be in place. Let me think about other stuff. I think that's about it in that regard. I think those were some pieces that we have really found to be particularly helpful.
Sarah, did you have something?
I did. We've just had an email question come in that kind of fits on this topic that I wanted to make sure I addressed. If you don't mind, if that's okay, Alex.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to do that, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm curious too. Are there certain types of AT evaluations that absolutely cannot be done remotely, or that you absolutely recommend not be done remotely?
I don't do this, but I would think that a MAT test or some of the things that PTs do would be almost impossible. And I think about the reason I say that is because during my classroom years, my students had a good bit of physical involvement most of the time, as well as communication involvement. And as a teacher then, and I'm not saying I would do it better now, but I hope I might. As a teacher, I didn't know how, the kinds of things that you're feeling, and you can tell when it's gone too far just because of the way it feels. Mm-hmm. I think it would be very difficult to replicate that with someone else doing the hands-on part, who may or may not understand exactly what you're looking for. So I would think that was hard. Now, on the other hand, there are probably OTs and PTs here who may have a different opinion on that. But to me, that would be the hardest part because of the things that you have with seating and positioning, the things that you have to feel that tell you, you learn what the limits are. And you learn things like, for me, a student who had a really big AT&R response. I thought as a new to special ed teacher that maybe we could just, tether her arm. And thank goodness I worked with a really good PT, and I asked her about it, and she said, so then it'll rip out her shoulder. It won't do what you want. And I didn't know. And that's the kind of thing we don't want to accidentally have happen to kids. So that would be, I think anything that involves sort of the movement of the child. We certainly don't want to have secondary disabilities come through what we were trying to do with the best of intentions, because it was outside of our particular scope. I think certainly the technology that Janice talks about, so that you can see as much as you can, hear as much as you can, is really important. I think also we have to be able to really, I guess I sort of like the notion that, because I believe that one of the things that long time ago, when the first Tech Act projects came out, Arkansas Tech Act project put out this list of sort of not best practices particularly, but important ideas in assistive technology. And one of them was, don't practice lone ranger rehab. You cannot have but your own perspective, even if you're trained in everything. You're an OT and a PT and a SLP and a teacher, and you've been to school your whole entire life, obviously. And there really aren't many people that are that, but there are people who would say, well, if I have a lot of credentials, I can do a lot of these things. You are still one perspective. and one observer, even if you're observing many, many things, because I think all of us observe a lot more if we've been fortunate enough to work with people who have different kinds of training than we do, we pick up some of that stuff. But that doesn't mean we should think that we can be unbiased and observant about all of those things. So that not practicing doing this by yourself means that we really have to make sure that the family is deeply involved in the decision making. Legally, they're always supposed to have been, but now it's easier than ever to see why it's important, because a lot of the implementation is going to happen in that space.
Great. Janice, do you have anything to add to this?
I guess the only thing I haven't talked to a PT who's working with children, but we did have a comment from an OT in the chat that says that she's able to do some work around that with children. But I have a PT because I'm in the middle of physical therapy, and they're doing remote services. But they're working with adults, and I don't know that they're doing initial evaluations. I think they're providing services, but I don't know that they're doing initial evaluations. And I would have to, like Joy, lean into the group, the PTs, OTs that are here, with thoughts if they could do it, because I would have a hard time envisioning that as well.
Michelle, thank you for saying that. That's very hopeful.
Yeah.
We hear so many things that teachers and therapists and families and kids are doing, so many things that we would have a year ago not imagined
Right.
that they would be possible. But as I look at you and as I think about the assistive technology people that I've known over all of these years, many of you are here, and what to me makes an assistive technology person, I sort of shy away from the notion of expert, because I don't think we can ever really know everything. You just can't, because you're not there all the time. But I think what we have is that we have, by damn it, we will figure out a way. And I think that's what we do really, really well. I mean, really well. If you see the kinds of things that are happening now, that people on the ground with these immense pressures are figuring out ways to teach kids, and ways to provide therapy for kids, ways to do evaluations. And I almost wish that this had been 1 week later, because New York City Schools is doing some really interesting things with remote assessment. And they're also working with other, I think, Chicago, and they've reached out to LA and looking at that group working together, saying, how do we make this work in these systems that have just got so many students? And they have said, as Janice said, if you're doing an initial eval, it's a much different thing than if it's a student you already know about. Mm-hmm. And so then you can, because you have some ideas and some experience with that student and or that family, and you've built up some rapport, hopefully, then that's really a good thing. They're going to trust you. They're going to work with you. You're going to trust them. I think probably we've always known that building trust, and the notion that we are collaborating, not just because that's the word we're supposed to use, but we truly do realize the importance of the collaboration and what everybody brings to the table. When you already know somebody, that's a whole different deal than this is a brand new person that you had not worked with before in an environment where both the student and certainly the families, are under potentially immense pressures that we couldn't imagine if we were not seeing people experiencing them. Safe homes for students where the family has out of work. They are having issues with food, with housing that they never anticipated having. Even a home that was safe a year ago may or may not be safe now. And I do know too, and I would challenge you to probably say that you can think of the same situation. There were times with certain students that I worked with that if the bus was 10 minutes late, I was going to go insane. That student is now with his family 24 hours a day. That's tough. And that's part of that whole environmental situation that we need to look at. And someone said, and I really, really love this, someone said, Bloom comes before, Maslow comes before Bloom. If your Maslow hierarchy is not going well, putting Bloom on top of it is really not going to move anybody forward, which isn't okay to say that means I don't have to teach this kid or provide therapy to this kid, but it does help us really think about the hierarchy of importance, if you will.
So if I may, I'd like to ask a question again. I'd love to see both of you discuss some assistive technology options that might be embedded in platforms that teachers are using, you know, outside of the clunky device that has to be kept in a back dusty, you know, storage room, or, you know, dropped off on the porch and then you run away real quick. What are some things that are already embedded in many platforms that people may or may not know about already that you have found helpful?
Well, I think one of the, and this is of course very much right down the road of what we're talking about in sites when we're looking at ed tech and AT, particularly working together for students, is so many times that people don't know what the built-in options are. Mm-hmm. Or they may know, but they don't necessarily see them as assistive technology. Mm-hmm. Text-to-speech might be convenient for me or an option for me, but I can also talk sometimes far too much. But if Janice cannot speak orally or cannot read, text-to-speech is going to be critical for her. And it is going to be the very same feature in a device that is commonly available to everybody as an option for some. If it's required by one, it goes in that person's IEP, because if they go somewhere else, nobody will know unless you document that. I used to teach in a classroom that was basically a communication classroom, lots of other issues, but that was the focus of it. And we were really blessed because we had everything. Well, everything that was available then, which is certainly not what's available now, but lots and lots of things. So everything was available to the students in that room. But if they went out of that room, people had to know what they needed, because every kid did not need everything in that room. Every kid used a little bit of everything in that room, probably in most cases. But if we had not documented what it was, even if it's built in, or maybe especially if it's built in, it still needs to be documented as needed by that kid. So something that's, and this is where, this is tricky, I think, something that's an option for everybody. If it is required by one, no matter if it's typically available for everybody, built into the computer, whatever, still goes in the IEP, that particular feature. Maybe not the name of that device, but certainly that feature.
Janice, do you have any specific examples to add to that from Zoom world or?
Well, I guess Joy talked about, there's really kind of a run-of-the-mill reading, text-to-speech, speech-to-text. So many things are already bit color overlays, or zooming in, making the screen larger. There's so many things that are already built into so many of your devices. In fact, you're all using a device right now. And so what's already built into your device, I can't even begin to emphasize how critical this is, that as AT leaders in the nation, that you know that exists and you know what those are, and you impress upon everyone in your circle, in your world, that these are built in. And the reason that's critical is because we need to make sure students know that, because the power in their hand that they need when they walk out the door after graduation is critical. they need to know when they're in the workplace and they cannot read print-based material, that there is so much power in their hand that can provide that support for them. That it is a tool that they need, and it's a speed bump and they can move right along. And so that self-determination and that self-advocacy is critical. And there are, I can't think of really a lot of devices, laptops, tablets that really don't have so many of those powerful tools already built in.
Actually, one thing that I would love to see, and I am absolutely not saying we should not talk about assistive technology, because I think that's critical that we don't lose that term. However, I would like it if in general technology, the technology that anybody can buy or use or whatever, if we didn't talk about accessibility features and just talked about features. What will this device do? Because people, if they don't perceive a disability being involved, they don't go to the accessibility features. And one of the really, I guess I have felt that way for a long time, as general devices have had more and more and more power, which is not to say there are not things that we have to add to those devices sometimes, but especially for kids with learning disabilities, just about everything they need is right in there if they only knew, and hopefully could learn to manipulate themselves. And part of that is making sure that they're aware of what's there. But I think that I had an experience with my iPhone, because I got an iPhone and I was going to take it back because I was walking on the beach at the time, 3 miles in the morning. That was my task I was doing, and my tool was my iPhone and my headphones, and I walked to Hamilton. It was very motivating to me. Cool, that's great, except that the sound only came out of one ear. And it was like, okay, it's obvious it's a device that makes music. All devices that make music or have sound have balance, right? I looked and I looked and I looked, and there was nothing in my iPhone that said balance. So I figure, obviously it's broken. And a few days later, I was looking for something in the accessibility features. And there was what I would call the feature of balance was there as an accessibility feature in case you could only hear out of one ear. Come on. I mean, really, I think I'm fairly savvy about assistive technology, and I would have never thought to look there for the balance if I just hadn't run across it. So if it had just been a feature, it would have been obvious to everybody, including me. And once I found the balance, I could hear by Hamilton out of both ears, and it was much better. So I just think that there's something about those features that are labeled as accessibility features that just scream disability at people, might be more effective and efficient, and people would learn more about them if they were simply features in a device.
Thank you. So we have lots of questions coming in the chat, but I appreciate them all. But unfortunately, we have limited time, so I'll pick some. A question I would like to ask of you, because I think it kind of goes back to something we discussed a little bit before, is Hannah is asking if we have students who are in full remote placements and they recently started using a new AT device, simple switches, for example, how do you best facilitate their growth and determine if it's the correct device? And to me, it goes back to this conversation about what are some best practices for supporting implementation and evaluation via remote connection.
I think one of the things that would be important, and I'm not basing this on anything, but I mean, I would bet you that half the people in this, more than half of the people out here could answer, all of you we could all be in this discussion, and it would be wonderful. I look at, it's a bit intimidating to look and see you guys and say, oh my gosh, you're listening to what we're saying. Well, okay. But to me, again, if you have that common vision of where you're going and what you want someone to do with that remote switch or whatever that you're using, that switch, it's a really simple, what are you trying to do? You're trying to build that notion of cause and effect. You're trying to build someone being able to respond or whatever it is you're looking for there. And then a few examples of what that might be and how that might happen. And then something that's actually doable by the family in the home. And then hopefully something that's repeated fairly often. So there are multiple opportunities for the student to build this switch access if that's what you're going for. But you're not going for switch access for the purpose of switch access. You're going for switch access for some purpose. And that's really, I think, what you want to see is what can we do that's going to lead us in that way? And which is another thing about the discussion that we're having is, okay, here's where we're going, but what's the first step we might be taking? What's the second step we might be taking? Because let's say that we want someone to use a single switch, and the goal is they will use a single switch to run their AAC device, okay? That's the goal. But if the kid is currently not even paying attention to the switch, we're not going to be using it to work that AAC device too soon. So first we want to attract, making sure that the student has some power with that switch, something they can make happen. We talk a lot about not using technology with someone who has no cause and effect. And to me, maybe they need that to have some cause and effect. And I guarantee you too that they also know a little bit about cause and effect. The baby who stops crying when the third time you walk into the room where you picked them up the first 2 times, they stop the third time because they know you're going to pick them up. That's understanding cause and effect, but it's not the cause and effect we're looking at when we're talking about technology. And it's not the cause and effect that we're looking at when I say to my husband, well, all I said to my daughter was this, and she went crazy. Oh, there's some cause and effect there too. But knowing that if I hit this switch, this grown-up is going to do something really silly, that's power for a kid, real power. Watching what's happening on the computer screen may not make much difference, but using your switch to make the music so that all the grown-ups in the room dance, and then they say, oh, I'm so tired, don't hit that switch again. Oh, please, just give me a break. You're going to get that switch hit going really, really well. So some of those kind of things that seem very simple, but could easily be done at home that provide that power and actually will help that person say, oh, this switch will do that. Let's see what else we can do with that, we say to the student or to the parent, and build that way. Not worrying about reaching the end right now, but what can we do to move toward that end right now?
Janice, do you have anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. As working with the educators and my colleagues across the state, the one thing that they're doing for their families that are remote is they're giving them some ideas. This is what we're looking for. They're doing some training with the parents. This is what we're looking for. They have some data that they help them tease out what they're, specifically, here's what we need to happen, and this is what it will look like if it's successful, that sort of thing, and ways to take data. They give them some nice written instructions and support. That's one way to do that. If you can't do the video and can't do that type of support, it's just harnessing the power of the family and the parent, and see if, to get some of those resources and knowledge to them so that that student can move forward.
So another question I have for you all, thank you, is a little bit different direction, maybe more towards the general technology, as Joy keeps referring to that. What is some advice you could give to teachers or educational providers for collaboration with AT specialists and or instructional designers to enhance the remote learning and teaching or the hybrid? So, in the current times, right? What is some advice you could give for that connection and collaboration? What should teachers be doing in order to access supports from instructional designers or AT specialists? What have we learned over the last 9 months, I guess?
I guess I'll use sites as an example that we're working with 7 districts around the country. And we had just begun the work with them when the pandemic hit. And they had filled out a fairly extensive application to be one of the 7 districts that we worked with over a 5-year period or 4-year period. And we were concerned that we would find that nothing had changed. But one of the things they had to do in their application is they had to list their AT person, their IT person, quite a group of people who came together to form this team. And what they told us to a district was it made all the difference in the world that we knew who these other people were. Because when the pandemic hit and the Office of Special Education Programs said, thou shalt serve every child, which was absolutely the right thing to do, even though we didn't really know how that might happen, all the people on that team said, oh my gosh, we have got to talk together because none of us can do this alone. And somehow before the pandemic, the understanding of that was not as immediate and critical. It was like, yes, we'll work toward that. We'll make some slow progress. But even just knowing who each other were and what they did was critical. And I think many times teachers and families don't even know the supports, especially in larger systems. They may not know who to call, who to communicate and collaborate with. So I think that notion of really looking for those people who may be your collaboration partners over time. The teacher knows what the kid has to learn. They may not have an idea at all how to go about making that happen if the kid is using technology and they're not as familiar with what that technology might be. So collaborate, how can we make that happen is a great question for AT people. We love that question, don't we? That how can we? All right, let's go. But we can't decide what's supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen, in fact, that's what made me love Universal Design for Learning, is in the early days, we were very focused on access to the life, the education, the whatever. And some of us, and I know there are a few of you who've been around here, not maybe almost as long as me, a couple of you, and you were providing access to something that really wasn't all that good for anybody. And so all of a sudden we became instructional designers to some point with not a lot of control over the instruction. We certainly became creative in how can we help this student be involved in this? And yet this had to be something the student wanted to be involved in, as all the students needed to be. And I think that some of the things that are happening in general education are really good for that, because that's another thing that the pandemic has shown, is that we can't just lecture to somebody all day. They can't handle it, and we can handle it. So I think that's a part of it, is knowing who your potential partners are in making this happen, whatever this is.
I think what I would add to that, I think Joy is absolutely correct, that harnessing the power of universal design for learning. If I were queen of the world, every school would have an instructional designer. My doctorate is in instructional design, and so I get that piece of weaving all of the UDL. UDL is one instructional design model that we're lucky in education to have our own instructional design model, because there's so much thought and research behind that. But the pre-design of the instruction and the thoughtful design of the environment, whether that be in a face-to-face environment or a distance environment, and what that looks like, mitigates a lot of problems before one goes live. And so we all we all went live. Yeah, we went from 0 to 60. And I think if we don't stop, it will be very disappointing if we don't stop and look back and get some lessons learned on our instructional design and the value of the specialists, as Joy said, making sure everyone knows everyone. You know who your partners are. The AT specialists providing support are the instructional designers. But it's really that you have to work together, because all the voices at the table are important.
whether the table is a table like we're sitting around right now, or one where you can actually, we call it seeing people in 3D when you can actually touch them. You know, but the other thing that I think is probably important, Janice was talking about the hands and not being able to see the hands, and that's true. You can see Janice's and mine because that's how we talk, but that doesn't necessarily tell you anything about how well we can use them for other fine motor kinds of things. So one of the, I guess, to sort of circle back a little bit about the beginning is to think about when we're looking at our tools, our response, is to remember that it's not just how we support the student, but how we build an environment in which the student is able to learn and grow and feel invited, and barriers are lowered as much as possible. And then if that kid has some more barriers, then we work on those. But a lot of, I think early on, one of the mistakes that we made, and we were doing the best we could, we just didn't know, was thinking that matching a technology to a kid, or a set of technology, and not just a kid, to anyone, was going to create this opportunity for wonderful forward progress. And over and over and over, we saw a lot of disappointment, partly because we didn't build that shared knowledge of where we were going, and then partly because we didn't build that environment or strengthen that environment so that not only the student who was our target student, but the other students in that environment. When back way in the olden days when students were in classrooms, you remember a year ago. And so it's different to say that we're going to look at how do we build that environment when it's house with mom and dad and 3 brothers and sisters. What do we do and how can we do that? And know that there's only, we have to give up that. I think we've always had an illusion of some sort of control, and now we don't even have that illusion anymore because we don't have it. But we still have to do what we have to do for compliance, and compliance is the base. It's not the ceiling, it's the floor. And yet we're hearing people all over the country say, if I can just comply, I will feel happy. But that's not where we want to end up. And we want to, as Janice says, that we want to learn something now. And I think one of the things that I was in a conversation this morning with someone, and they said, I fear that we are going to go back to just like things were before. Oh. Personally, I can't even hardly imagine that happening, but it certainly could. And people who have been so challenged and felt so out of control, having to use technology that they were not comfortable with, are going to possibly long for that going back to the same thing they did before. And if we have learned nothing from this, it will be very disappointing in our field. And I don't think we're a field that disappoints. So I think we're going to learn something. I just wish we had some data that people, what did work, what didn't work. All of these free tools that we have now are not going to be free forever, but they're free right now, or they have been free. Which ones do we continue when they cost money because they made a difference? And what difference did they make? And somebody said one time when we were talking about what kind of data can you gather, because all you want to do is throw more responsibilities on people that are already at their limit. And the simple answer was, well, ask the families, ask the kids, what worked, what didn't work, what did we try? And yet we're not doing that in a very systematic way in most places. Some of the districts we're working with in sites are saying, we have data that we didn't even know we had. And we can use this data to make decisions. And it's like, yes, because that's what we want. Not just, I like Martin McKay, so we've got to go with text help. That's not a decision, a good way to make a decision, even though I love Martin McKay. That's not why you choose to continue using Read and Write or whatever tool you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. So we have only a couple of minutes left. Any parting words, something you want to leave our audience with? Janice, if you could start.
Oh, gosh.
1 minute. This is pressure. 1 minute left before we need to turn everyone off.
I actually have just that one statement. It takes a village, and I think that really is so true. I mean, we've known it for a long time, but boy, do we all have to work together. It's been quite the ride. But the collaboration and what Joy is talking about, just the collaboration with all of the different professionals and the families and students, all those voices together is really important as we move forward. And I hope we don't go back to business as usual.
And I would certainly agree with that. I look out at you all, as many as I can see at one time, and know that people are learning from you and with you. And my hope is that we will, as a field, continue to be leaders in technology. Is not technology for technology's sake.
That's right.
Technology is to help everyone do something that they couldn't do without it. Most of us, well, maybe we just want to entertain ourselves, and that's okay, as long as that's not all we're doing with it. But if a student is needing, or a person is needing assistive technology to be able to communicate, participate, be productive, that's what it's for. It's not for technology. But if someone doesn't have the technology or doesn't know how to use the technology or what's possible with that technology, then we'll have a hard time actually helping that person grow into that communicative, participative, productive person that we want everybody to be.
Thank you. Well, thank you both so much for your time tonight and sharing your expertise. And thank you to 70+ participants for hanging out with us, especially those on the East Coast for whom it's kind of late in the evening.
8:01.
All right. Well, everyone have a great night, and we'll have a recording available on ISET website as well as on our Facebook group. So if you're not a member, please join.
And thank you for having us. I'm sure that we are both just so grateful. And as we look out at who we are all together in this group, oh my, I would have loved to have heard everything you all had to say on this topic too.
Thank you. I would love to
everyone.
have coffee with all of you.
We'll just have to figure out a way to do that, right?
Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.